Yeah. Well, I'm going to call him up to do the scene. Good evening. Hine matav u'manayim shevasachem gam yachad. So we're here tonight for, I don't want to say the 29th Yartzait, because who's counting? You know, every day Ari's not here is another day of grief. But in the meantime, it's his Yartzait, and we're going to do what Ari loves best. We're going to all get together, and he loved the good Farbrengen. So first of all, the most important part of the evening is the siyum that Aaron Kalbach is going to be making for us. I'm going to call you up now, and Aaron, take over, please.
Thank you, Devari. The siyum is going to be on Mesachtas Hayriyas. The end of the Masechta, the Gemara discusses the story of it's an interesting story between Reb Nassan and Reb Yosef and Reb Meir versus Reb Shimon ben Gamliel, that they didn't like the way they were getting respected by him, and they looked to ask him questions on Masechtas he didn't know. And the night before, one of the picking out Reb Yosef and Reb Meir from the Beis Medrash, and at the end the Talmidim wanted them back because they had the best questions, and they let them in, but they used to call them. They wouldn't call them by their names anymore. We used to call Rab Nassan Yesh Aimrim and Rab Meir, they would call them Achirim. In the Gemara, when it says Achirim Aimrim, it's referring to Rab Meir. So the Gemara continues and goes through different opinions about which type of Talmid Chacham is better. So Am Rabbi Yochanan Pliguba, Rab Shimon Gamliel Rabbanan. Rabbi Yochanan says that Rab Shimon Gamliel and Rabbanan had an argument which type of Talmud Chacham is better? Chad Amar Sinai Adif. One said Sinai, which means Har Sinai, which means, Rashi says, it means that he has the Mishnayos and the Brises. He knows them very well. He knows them verbatim, as if they were given from Har Sinai. The other one says that someone that is he uproots mountains. Rashi means someone that he's very sharp and he's able to do a lot of pilpul in Torah. So even if he doesn't know as many Mishnayos and Brises, that he's better. He's very sharp and he's able to ask a lot of questions. Rabbi Yosef was Sinai. Rabbi Yosef was called Sinai, and Rabbah was called Eker Harim. So they asked Shalchut Haman. They asked, I think in Eretz Yisrael, Ezon Kaidim, which one's better? So Shalchut Lahu, they sent to him Sinai Adif, the one that knows the stuff very well, knows the material, even if he doesn't know it as sharp. Everyone needs the person that has the wheat, meaning you have the original stuff. He has all the Mishnayos and the Brises, so as if they were given from Sinai. That's the most important thing, and you're able to do it according to halacha. So between Rabbi Yosef and Rabbah, Rabbi Yosef was better. Rabbi Yosef didn't accept this, that he should be better than Rabbah. Malach Rabbah Esen Tartan Shnin. Rabbah was considered the head for 22 years. V'hadar Malach Rabbi Yosef, and then Rabbi Yosef became the head. V'chol Shani the Malach Rabbah, and as long as Rabbah was the main teacher, Rabbi Yosef afilu umna lebeisa lechalaf. Rabbi Yosef didn't even take a small kibbud of accepting a person that used to take out blood into his house. He would go to, that's a kibbud that only someone that's a high stature would accept. He would go himself, and he wouldn't accept the kibbud in the times of Rabbah. Abaye v'Rava, the Gemara continues and says another group of Amoraim that had the same question of which type of Talmid Chacham is better. Abaye v'Rava, Rav Zera, Rabba bar Masna. All these Talmid Chacham were Rabbi Yasvu. They were sitting. Rabbi Tzich Reisha. They needed a head. Amri Koma, the Amr Milsav Mifrech. Whoever's going to say something that's not able to be shlugged up, Lahav Reisha, the Kula, he should be the head. If the Kulu Ifrech, they were able to slug up everyone else's things. The Abaya, but they weren't able to slug up Abaya's things. So Chazir Rabba Abaya, the Gav Rabba saw that Abaya he became of a higher, his face was higher, he became like after he felt some type of exaltedness. Amalei Nachmeni, Pasach Ve'ema. Nachmeni, he called him on his father's name. He said, you should be the head, you should say say Torah. And they asked Rab Zera, Rabba bar Masna, Haimana Adif, who's better, Rab Zera or Rabba bar Masna? What was the difference between them? Rab Zera, Char from Maksha. Rab Zera, he was very sharp. He used to have a lot of questions on what he learned, and he would come up with very sharp questions, very sharp answers. But Rabba bar Masna, Mosin and Masik. Rabba bar Masna was patient. He would learn it patiently and be ma'ayin very, very much. And he also used to come according to halacha. So the last question, the Gemara says Teku. So it's just funny that the end of Mesachtes Harius it says Sinai, right? So Ari's father was his name is one of his names is Sinai, and also Rabbi Yosef, Ari's second name, they called him Sinai. And Ari's second name was Sinai, was Yosef. So these two things of Iker Harim and Sinai, you could say Ari had both of these things. Ari was always running. He was sharp and on the ball, and when he learned, I'm sure he learned. I wasn't there, but from his friends, he learned in a very energetic way, and I'm sure he was saying he learned it in a very deep and sharp way. But he stayed according to the Messiah, that he was very connected to the Rebbe, and according to Chassidus, living his life according to Chassidus, he went on Miftzayim, he did all the things a Bacher would do. So Ari contained all the different milas of all. So you're asking, which one's better? Ari contained all of these things all together, and therefore there was no question how of his stature. But so maybe we take his lesson of his life in our life. We should our skashos to the Rebbe should be in a deeper way, and also we should have energy in what we do. We should whatever we're doing, whether it's in our business, right? Ari was very energetic at sports also, so it doesn't have to just be in learning. You should be energetic in all what you're doing in your work, in your life, with your kids, with your family. You should have energy. You should have a smile. Right? Ari used to smile. Yeah. You should have a smile, and yeah, through that we'll bring Mashiach, and very soon we'll have Ari together with us. Okay, I'm going to say the thing at the end of the Masechta, and then we're going to say Kaddish. Hadron Allah, Kain Mashiach, Siklu Masechtas Harius. Hadron Allah Masechtas Harius, Hadron Allah, Titan Allah Masechtas Harius, 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 Hadron Allah Masechtas Harius, Titan Allah Masechtas Harius, Masechtas Harius, Hadron Allah Masechtas Harius, Titan Allah Masechtas Harius, Hadron Allah Masechtas Harius, Hadron Allah Titan Allah Masechtas Harius, Titan Allah Masechtas Harius, Titan Allah Masechtas Harius, Ratzon Menachem Aleinu V'Zinu, Das Lusinu Amzad, Imi Lama Ba, Hanina Ba Papa, Rami Papa, Nachma Papa, Choy Ba Papa, Abraham Mori Papa, Rafam Papa, Raksh Ba Papa, Sucher Ba Papa, Adar Ba Papa, Zer Ba Papa, Hadron Aleinu V'Zacham V'Inu V'Zacham V'Zal, Ninachnu Lanu Nachnu Zazinu Zayik Am V'Zal, Lunu Endu Shmecha, Ednu Seresacha, Yebtach Kmini V'Zacha, Ge'el Mihi Li, Yibli B'Samem K'Acha, Lanu Levish, Lanu Levish K'Madacha, Ashka K'Madacha, Mam K'Yusani Ba'Achad, the name Dinu K'Acha, Amun Salavad, B'Dim Achnu Lachan Aleinu V'Zinu, Shamta V'Ginu V'Yeshu V'Yesmedesh, Samta V'Ginu V'Yeshu V'Kanan, Shanam Shkim Mehim Meshkim, Alam Shkim Devetera, Alam Shkim Devam Tela, Alam Meilim Meilim Meilim, Alam Meilim Kamasacha, Meilim Im Kamasacha, Anu Rasm Him Rasm, Anu Rasm Chaylam Ba, Him Rasm Ver Shachas, Shem Ata Him Dein Ver Shachas, Dam Mima Yechzim Meim Neftach Lach, Rasm Menachem Hayu V'Sharim Shachtan Zaim Sachas Serious, Hazin Hasam Sachas Svarim, Achenim Sam Dim Lamed Shmelasas Chaim Skol Divid Sam Sachab Ava, Kuschet Kotanaim Abraham Mustam Cham Yamen Li Zari, Stamash Ter Pi Zari Zera Zari Ad Erlam Skaim Vi Zachatan Chaisa, Shachot Ishma Lacha, Akseisa His Sechacha, Gibi Mecha, Sifel Chach Shnes Chaim Erch Yam Mina, Smel Chaisher V'Chaved Nech Aviz Amiyit and Nebrach Smeb Shalom. Is someone else? Oh. Iskalo Iskada Shmeraba. Ba'amad Rachudusa Yamach Machusi. Asmach Mekanu Kamashikei Mechayech and Mechan Chayta Chabis Israel because man Kadi Bimramein. Hey Shmerab Rachel Mayis Baruch Ishtabach Ishbarzim Snasi Vizadarvis Lavis Lashmit Kojabichu Elam Kapachas Vishasas Chasan Kamasa Minam Amma Bimramein Israel Varabana Tamadin Kota Bede Tamadin come on asking Bedaisa Dibasa Din Dibacho Asar Vasar Hilan Khan Shlamara Bachin Chista Rakam Chaim Vichan Zainer Vicha for Kadam Wooden Shmaya Bimramein Hey Shlamara Shmaya Chaim Tim Lena Valko Israel Bimramein Hi Sisham Remember Vyasasham Lena Valko Israel Bimramein.
Thank you, Aaron Yosef Yitzchak. Aaron Yosef he's the first name. He carries Ari's name. He's the first one named after Ari. He was born 2 months after. And we're so proud of you. I can't tell you, okay? You have the energy. You have all of it. So definitely thank you very, very much. So please eat. That's first of all. So you're probably wondering why I'm speaking. I'm not. I'm just going to say I'm just running the mic. So I want to say that I was in Cleveland for Purim, and while we were farbringing, and we had a very big farbringing, Shia had all his friends and Rabbi Chaikin, and we talked about Purim, that it was Ari loved Purim. Which kid doesn't love Purim? But he was 16 years old, and I could remember the last Purim that he was preparing the night before, all because he loved Mivtzoim, loved Mivtzoim. So he went, he was going then on Purim Day, he was going to give out to his route, which is in downtown Manhattan. So he was preparing all the shalach manis. I still remember it was on the bed and he's making piles of who gets what. We know, everybody sitting here knows because it goes on in everybody else's house. And I could remember that Purim, Ari was dancing on the trains because he was with his cousin, Hanoch Kaplan. And they were dancing on the trains on the whole way back from when they were coming back from downtown Manhattan. And he came into the house and dancing on the trains with everybody, telling everybody it's Purim. And he came home very lebedik. And of course we came home and we saw on the news what had taken place in Israel, which was ultimately, unfortunately, Ari was shot up. 3 days later, the van was shot because of the revenge attack that had happened in Israel at the time. But the first years after Ari passed, Ari was nifter, I actually could not make Yontif. My doors were closed. I didn't even give out Shalach Manis. I said, we'll never do Purim again. One day I had an epiphany, and I said, this is exactly the opposite of what Ari would want. Purim was his most valuable Yontif. He loved it. We all know, all the kids in the house are witnesses to this, how we'd get up, how we'd mimic people and make fun. When you asked if he smiled, he left already. Aaron Kalbach, he had a great sense of humor. He made everybody laugh, and we would be on the floor rolling. He loved a great Farbrengen, and he loved Purim. And I said, v'nahapachu me, that from now on, Purim is going to be very important to me. And so from then on, now Purim, you should know, everybody here, whoever sends me Shalach Manis, it means a lot to me. Because I go outside of myself to proper Purim. It's the hardest yontif for me. It's the hardest yontif. But I do it for Ari. I know that's what he would want me to do. And he would want us to do. So, I want you all here to know that it's very meaningful, every single one of you that are here with me tonight, with all of us. Because remembering Ari is very important. He didn't die for himself. He died for Klal Yisrael. He took the bullet for everybody, for each and every one of us. And him being on the van, I still remember, I don't remember who I was speaking to, someone from NYPD in the middle of the night last night, because there was an event that took place, and I was telling them, but you don't understand. They were talking about anti-Semitism to me. I go, no. He was in a van, in the place he should have been, in a protected space, where he was allowed to be, and the van was shot up. What more important place could you be than with your own classmates, your own Bachram with you? You're going, following the Rebbe. You're going to, not just my world turned over, but everybody's world turned over, and it should. And we must never forget. And I'm really here tonight doing this every year. It's very hard for me each year, even this. But I feel we have to honor his memory. Because today I was with somebody, and she said to me, Ari was a Kaddish. He was a Kaddish, the kid. Every time we have to stop and think and remember that. And he's my child, but he belongs to every single one of us here, not just me. Whoever's related to him, they have the blood in him. Whoever's not is part of our community. And I respect and I'm grateful to every single one. I'm looking at everybody. There's every history with every single person in this room. So before the next thing we're going to show, you're standing in the halls of the museum that carry Ari's name. I don't have to tell you, I'm not here to pitch anything, to sell anything, but I thought many of you in this room probably have never seen this. So we're building the 5th floor. And the 5th floor is going to be dedicated to Ari's memory. It's a work of love because I put many, many years in putting this together. It is going to happen within the next 2 years, but it's ready at the stage where we can even talk about it. So we prepared it, and I really want to share this with you because it's like, this is really wow. It's not just the 3 million visitors, but it really tells the story. This floor is going to tell the story. And nowhere in the world, the content of what is on this fifth floor has ever been shown in any museum anywhere in the world, meaning it speaks to the anti-Semitism from the beginning of the Crusades up until modern-day anti-Semitism. You'll probably see different Holocaust museums, different museums that have been, but this one incorporates everything. Something we've never seen before, and of course, it will talk about Ari as well. And so I want to show it, but I think before we show that, I want to call up Michael Miller and say, who's Michael Miller? Michael Miller walked with me hand in hand, literally from the minute Ari, I never knew him before. He didn't exist as part of our community. He doesn't come, Yeshiva University, a whole different thing. But he retired b'lev nefesh because this man has stood through me courtroom. We know the same things, we understand. And he goes to Ari. And he goes with his family to Ari. And he davens by Ari. And he came tonight when I told him, he said, of course, without even, there's no to do here. It's just, he's going to say a few words, and then we're going to show the video. So please. I didn't say who you are, but please represent. You have to introduce yourself. I didn't say who you are.
Thank you very much, Dvara. Dvara whispered in my ear a few minutes ago that she wanted me to say a few words, so this is nothing that I've prepared. I'm sitting next to Serge, and I had mentioned to him that before I stepped through these doors, it brought back a whole wave of memories. Again, you heard my name, Michael Miller. At that time, I was the Chief Operating Officer, the Executive Director of the Jewish Community Relations Council of New York, of the JCRC, which is an umbrella for more than 50 different Jewish organizations in New York, including the Crown Heights Jewish Community Council. I still remember receiving the call about the shooting on the Brooklyn Bridge. I dispatched one of our staff members to the Brooklyn side of the bridge. I had another staff member take care of the office, and I went downtown. Our offices were then on 36th Street on the west side. I went downtown and went to City Hall. I must say that the role that Mayor Giuliani played at that time was incredible. And what the mayor did was that he allowed me, as a representative of the Jewish community of New York, to operate out of City Hall and to communicate with people as to what was happening. And that night, the mayor went to the hospital. That's the first time that I met Dvorah Halberstam. I'm just seeing pictures in my mind that and from that moment, I pledged that anything and everything that I could do to bring justice for Dvorah and her family, I would do. I also paid a Shiva visit at the same time that the mayor did. I'm not a politician, but and just sitting in front of Dvorah, and as her tears flowed this evening, as you could imagine, they flowed even stronger that night that we went to visit. Yeah. One of the things that I did is to go to the trial of Rashid Baz every day of the trial. I think I missed one day and I sent somebody from my office to go, but and just being there and identifying on behalf of the Jewish community of New York with Devorah and her family hopefully brought some meaningfulness, despite the tragedy of the murder of her son. I want to mention one other thing, and that's who Devorah Halberstam is. In Shoftim, it says, Devorah Isha Neviah Eshes Lapidos, that Devorah was a prophetess and the wife of Lapidos, and then it goes on to say that she was a Shofetes B'Yisrael. The Metzudas David on that pasuk indicates that Devorah was Zrizah b'ma'aseha. Was Zrizah b'ma'aseha. What does that mean? What's a Zariz? Zariz is somebody who has endless energy. Endless energy. B'ma'aseha, with what she did. And in that zchus, she became a shofetes al Yisrael. She became a judge. Well, Devorah Halberstam is just a descendant along the same lines and probably has the same DNA as Devorah HaNeviah. Who has been more zariz or zrizah than Devorah Halberstam in bringing justice, not only for Ari, which of course she did, by making certain, bucking up against the FBI, bucking up against Chuck Schumer in the Senate, bucking up every member of Congress to ensure that her son's murder was designated as a terror attack. I still remember going to the FBI here in New York when it was labeled as road rage. Road rage? Yes. The rage was in Devorah Halberstam, and she never let them forget it until it was labeled as a terror attack, which is what it was. Zrizah b'ma'aseha. And she was judging them as a shofetes. How many articles, Devorah, have you written? How many op-eds have you written on the subject? There is something very unique and very compelling about our being here this evening in memory of Ari Halberstam. That Ari, as a kadosh, truly as a kadosh, Hashem Yimkom Domo, that truly as a kadosh is speaking for all of us as Jews, and frankly for anybody else who is a victim of terror, victim of a crime, to stand up for what is right, to ensure that justice is accomplished. And I still remember sitting in the courtroom when Rashid Baz was convicted and sentenced to over 40 years to life in prison. And that wasn't certainly enough for Devorah. I was in Israel in October, and she's on the phone with me about getting to, well, I mentioned which congressman, but getting to a congressman about some measure that can be taken to ensure that he never gets out of prison. Doesn't end. Doesn't end. Tragedies never end. But you can be surrounded by people who care. And surrounded by family, which all of us tonight, in fact, are. And of course, having Chani and having Shia here and Sarah quite a distance away. Oh, and Mendy. He's in Florida? And Mendy in Florida. Thank you. But tonight, we're part of the Halberstam family. And having entered into that family through tragedy, Bezras Hashem Yisbarach, we should all emerge from this tragedy with many, many more simchos. And I thank Devorah for bringing us all here today. And may Ari's Yehi Zichro Baruch, may his memory always be for a bracha for all of us. I hope, Devorah, that whatever I said here was what you wanted me to say. I just feel from my heart for all of us that Ari continues to live in many different ways here in this museum, but more importantly, in our hearts.
I just have to say, Michael, you forgot the most important part. Michael, you forgot the Ari Halberstam Memorial Ramp. You sat with me in all the city council hearings. And your father said it'll never get done. So every mayor since then has called me every time they're crossing the bridge and telling me that every time they cross the bridge, they think about Ari. Just letting you know that. And hundreds and thousands of other people. You remember?
Yes, I did forget about the bridge, despite the fact I drove over it this morning. And Devorah is just so determined. It wasn't just a matter of naming the ramp after Ari, and I was there when the sign was first put up, but how many signs were there with Ari's name on it? How many signs were there? His memory will never, ever be forgotten.
Amen. Okay, I hope everybody's eating. Please eat. And I want to, of course, point out everybody in the room, family, friends, all of you. But I should tell you, we have representatives from the mayor's office. I don't usually shout at anyone. It's Ari's Yartzait. It's his night. But I still will say they're very busy people. But these are people, I promise you, as I stand here, you're all witnesses in this room. These are Fred Kreisman, he's the commissioner of Joel Eisdorfer, senior aide to the mayor. Richie Taylor, who's like my son, he's in the room, my big brother, or my younger brother, not my big brother. I'm the senior. And how much, I don't know who else is here, Menashe's not here, but how they watch over Ari's memory from day one. And they are the keepers. You are the keepers of his memory. I want you to know that you sit right there next to the mayor. He's a good friend of mine, but it's not enough that you took your time out tonight to come. It's very meaningful to me. Joel, you're not looking at me, okay? Moshe Indig and Williamsburg even came. See that? My good friend. Okay, could we see the video? Very proud to present you with it. And everybody, please eat.
What does a Jew look like? What makes up our Jewish identity, forged over thousands of years? And with anti-Semitism again on the rise, even here in New York City, how will we deal with this hatred of the other? Because what starts with words inevitably ends in violence. But no child is born with hatred in them. So our response is to educate the young, planting the seeds of understanding and acceptance. For almost 2 decades, Brooklyn's award-winning Jewish Children's Museum has introduced Jewish heritage and culture to millions of youngsters from diverse ethnic backgrounds. Today, the museum continues this vital mission and is now creating an exciting new presentation called Ari's Exhibition, Sharing Our Past, Shaping Our Future. dedicated to the memory of Ari Halberstam, the 16-year-old boy brutally gunned down on the Brooklyn Bridge in 1994. This will be the highlight of every visit. The museum is working with CompuGraphic, creators of museums, exhibitions, and visitor centers. And we look forward to working with the City of New York and Department of Cultural Affairs to build a brighter future for all our children. Ari's exhibition will employ a full range of cutting-edge technologies and latest educational techniques, incorporating both digital and physical activities, taking visitors on a journey from darkness to light. It will present its narrative through a series of 4 multi-sensory experiences: the March of Anti-Semitism, the Jewish Response, A Bridge to the Future, and the Hall of Respect and Inclusion. The journey begins with an age-sensitive introduction to anti-Semitism. Using latest multimedia and skillful storytelling, youngsters learn about the race hatred directed at Jews through the ages and around the world, and which still plagues humanity today. Then the darkness lifts, and visitors discover the Jewish response to anti-Semitism. This illustrates how Jews have always sought to bring more light into the world through advances in science and technology, medicine, philosophy, and the arts. From here, visitors cross the bridge to the future, meeting the moving story of Ari's love of life and his tragic murder at the hand of terror, a powerful message to acceptance and inclusion. Emerging into an immersive space that echoes into infinity, this is the Hall of Respect and Inclusion, where children discover their own power to bring light into the world. Here they are invited to take a stand in their lives for the light of respect, acceptance, and inclusion. Combining innovation and heart, Ari's exhibition will touch every visitor with its powerful message, proudly contributing to a better world for all our future generations.
Please eat before we move on to the next part of our program. I'm kidding. I'm not kidding. In the meantime, everybody should say l'chaim. Fred, you want to come up and say a few words?
Thank you, Devorah. So I think that after that, you need a minute to configure yourself. Just wanted to say, as we come together for Adaf Kodesh, after 29th Yartzait, coming together to celebrate the life of a remarkable individual, because it could have been anyone, any Yid, any Jew on that bridge that day, you know, and the work that Devorah does each and every single day to bring justice for all victims of any type of hate, discrimination, is truly remarkable. Most people wouldn't be able to go past the pain that a mother would feel after such an incident, but to pull herself together for the purpose of ensuring that others, no other mother, has to go through this suffering. She's probably the most vocal person I know, caring, compassionate, and it's a true Kiddush Hashem, because it's not only for Jews, it's for injustices against anyone. She had the vision to build a center like this. We saw the presentation. To have such a vision, to do the work that she's done from such a tragedy. As I cross the bridge on a daily basis, I see it, I remember during the Bloomberg administration when the signs had to be removed temporarily and we had to do some repair work on the bridge. We made sure that every single one of those signs were kept in the press office till the repairs were done. And even when I was leaving and the administration changed, I said, make sure nothing happens to those signs. But it's as we come together, we should take upon ourselves to realize this could have been anybody on that bridge. It was. We have to take it upon ourselves to ensure we do our portion to try to do what Devorah does each every day. I know it's an achrayus for people in a position like me, Joel, Richie, to be there day in, day out, to do our small portion to what like Devorah does, to ensure to be partners, to be on top proactively, reactively, every small incident, but just commending the work that you do day in, day out with this institution, your passion to what you do, and the Neshama should obviously have aliyah, the Zana Gita Beter Tzeuhiten, Gans Klal Yisrael, that the fact that we just reaffirm our commitment to be partners, to help protect the Yiddish kinder all the time and all the children, city's children, but I have our commitment on behalf of this administration, this mayor, his friendship, his love and appreciation to your friendship, to the work day in, day out of Richie with Joel, myself. We're committed to helping, assisting, and doing our part also. So again, Shum Aliyah and Zana Gita Beter for Gans Klal Yisrael.
Fred is the Commissioner of Community Affairs for the Mayor of the City of New York. And he's an extraordinary person, really extraordinary. And over the years, I know him for many years, since he was a little boy almost. I always say that it bothers him, but it's true. You could be my son, Fred. And I've watched your work and all the stuff you've done for the years. So, Bacha Yiten Alibo, of course. I don't have to tell you all that. I'm humbled by everything everybody said. Tonight is absolutely not about me. It is all about Ari, and I really want to focus on that, because it's about remembering him. A 16-year-old child should be murdered is not anything anyone could swallow. It doesn't matter how many years that this is. The suffering still goes on, and the grief. But like all Jews, like our history has taught us, I will never give up. I will never stop until I close my eyes for the last time on this earth. And I will continue reminding everybody about Jewish pride, about being proud of who we are. And I never like to tell this story, but I think it's an important one to tell tonight. So one of my children worked for one of the companies that you all know. And he was 10 years old when Ari was shot on the bridge and at the Brooklyn Bridge shooting. And he sent me an email about 2-3 years ago. And he said, I was 10 years old. I'm not from, but now he's not religious, he said, but back then he was. He's modern now. And he said that he went to one of the modern day schools that you all know in this room. And he said they called an assembly right after the shooting, and the assembly of all the kids in the school, and they made an announcement, the heads of the school, that everybody should take their kippah off their heads because it's not safe to live in America anymore. That was in 1994, my friends. 29 years later, it's really not safe to cross the Brooklyn Bridge. Even today, we never know. So, hatred is lurking. in all places, as we know. But we as Jews, we're standing here today, and we've stood up against hatred all our life. We must never, never give in to that. When they want to destroy us, we rebuild, and we have to be proud of who we are. If anything, I think that's what I've learned the most over all these years. I've worked with many administrations. I've met so many people. Richie Taylor, who is sitting and looking at me right now, he also, I think he went to public school again, or you went to a thing, and his uncle would tell him, don't sit by the window. Don't sit by the window. After the shooting. He was a little boy then. But you know, when they want to get us, you all know the bullet had an address. And when they want to get us, they find us. Doesn't matter where you're sitting, or which bus or what van. But let's just say tonight, I keep saying it's a celebration. It's a little hard for me to celebrate, but we have to. And I hope we can say l'chaim. So I think who I should call up, Shia, my son, Ari's brother, who was 4 years old, who Ari loved dearly. And yeah, who doesn't remember his brother, but he knows everything about him. And Shia, please come up and speak on behalf of your siblings and say something. Where are you, Shia? No? Say Meka l'chaim and bring l'chaim up here, okay?
Chaim L'chaim. May ours and Shema have an Aliyah and Yosef and Chani Sinai David. Chaim. There's not much more to say. I think my mother said it. We gather each year in memory of Ari. It's very meaningful that we all come together, at least once a year, to honor his memory and to remember the extraordinary character that Ari had, his midos, and in his conduct and how he carried himself and what he represented. I think everyone shared tonight so many meaningful memories and how Ari impacted them, and Ari's tragic killing and his passing affected them as they were young, and how they carried that with them through their lives. And the exhibition looks incredibly moving and inspiring. Thank you for sharing that, Ma. We're going to hear additional inspiring remarks tonight by Rabbi Jacobson, which we look forward to hearing. But I just wanted to say that may we all carry Ari with us and remember who he was and what he stood for and what he exemplified. And may we only share in simchas and only have happy occasions. L'chaim.
Obviously, I never met Ari, but he lives in our house. He breathes in our house. And so every year we make a Kiddush and Shul, and I try to say something that I've heard. And one of the things that I've said a few times is because the Yartzait often comes out before Parshas Parah. So I give a Dvar Torah about Parshas Parah and Ari, and what Ari represented. Parshas Parah is the only korban. It's a korban. It's called a chatas. It's the only korban that's given outside the precincts, outside the Har HaBayis, and outside the Temple Mount. The Kohen goes up. He has to be holier than holy. It says in the Mishnah that there's 3 levels of separation to keep truma kosher. When you give a korban, there's a 4th level because it's holier than truma. When you have to be separated for the parah aduma, it has 5 levels of separation. That's how holy this is. They have to go up, and they have to go to Har HaZeitim. They have to shech the animal. The person who's giving it has to stay pure. The person who does all the rituals actually gets tainted. He gets tumah. Okay? But when they're doing the procedure, it's very interesting that he has to keep his eye on the Kadosh HaKadoshim. There's a whole section in the Gemara Yuma, in Yom Kippur Gemara. And they discuss how can he see it if the gate of the whole Temple Mount is 20. How can he see it if he's looking because the gate is above it? And they discuss how there's each section, the women's section, then they go up to the Levite section, then they go up to the Kohanim section until it goes up higher and higher, so he actually can see right into the Kodesh Kadoshim, and he has to look at it. What's the point? The point, I think, is that when you take and you go outside the holy precincts, you have to keep your eye on the ball, so to speak. You have to be focused where the focus of life has to be. So when you're doing something and it's touching on death and holiness, you have to keep your eye focused on the ball. Ari was a holy child, and he had this. Dvorah talks about how he davened, how he made sure he always said his chitas and his part of Rambam, and always made sure he always did it. He always davened the bezrisus. He had this, when he was in front of the Rebbe, he was shaking and he turned pale, because when he was close and he was looking at the holy part, he had this inner connection to it. Okay, that's what the Lubavitch is. Lubavitch, and Ari represents Lubavitch. They go out, they do miftzoim, they go out to places that most Jews don't walk in, okay? But when they're doing it, they keep the focus, and they keep their focus on the Kadosh HaKadoshim all the time, so that they remain holy and pure. Ari's neshama should have aliyah, and we should only see everybody together. L'chaim, l'chaim.
Okay, to move on. Dr. Rubin, we're very grateful you're here tonight. Very meaningful. So I'm going to call up our keynote speaker, who's like fire and brimstone. Remember, Rabbi, fire and brimstone. Or don't go home tonight. You have a choice, you know. But you are, so I'm not worried. But one thing I do want to say to all of you here is I think it's important. We talked about Ari and who he was, and the one thing, maybe the rabbi will say it, but I have to say it, that the last mitzvah on this earth that Ari did was putting on tefillin. Because when he was in the hospital, he was the only boy, bacher, on that van that put tefillin on before the van left the hospital. And that's why he was late for the van. It was already rolling away. And he had to go run after the van and bang on the door. And the police, when they brought me his tefillin, at first they couldn't find it. They brought it to me in the hospital. They were all unraveled because he didn't have time to wrap them up before. And when they told him that the Rebbe's surgery was successful, Ari's last words before he was shot was, "Now I'm happy." All his friends told us that were with him. And tefillin was his most favorite mitzvah in the world. He just loved putting on tefillin, which is why on his route, he would always go out and put tefillin on with the people on the route. So it's why his tefillin have gone out to people after he passed, and we used it to put on tefillin. And he also split his tefillin between his two brothers, and he has one pair, and she has the other pair. And for all of you who I know you all understand what the mitzvah of tefillin is, and I think that at the end of the day, it was the last mitzvah in the world. Purim was his last yontif in this world. And I guess I told Rabbi Jacobson, I think it was this morning ago, you know what? You see, he completed what he had to complete in doing those two mitzvahs to finish the business up in this world. Do I accept it? Of course not. But that's just the way, what we're taught to believe, and so I have to accept it whether I like it or not. Anyway, having saying that, I'm going to say l'chaim to each and every one of you too. Nobody sang any songs here. It's supposed to be for bringing. Shalom Babakovsky, where are you? You know that Ari he played ball with you, didn't he? You know what we found in his back pocket? The game that he was having with you, Shalom Babakovsky. He had the pocket with the game. He had your game in his back pocket. You can't forget that, right? We have pictures of it. So you know that. So I'm going to call up Simon Jacobson, please, our keynote speaker, and pass the mic. In the meantime, please, nobody should be shy. Everybody, please eat. Introduce him properly. Rabbi Jacobson is, he's represents the Towards a Meaningful Life Center, and he is well known for the book he's written and thousands of lectures that he's given all over. He is a mentor to many. He has helped us in this museum with building the 5th floor. He's not only unique, but he's Chachma, Bina, and Das, all of the three things, all of the above. And for that, I'm really proud that you are part of this evening tonight. And we'll put, I was saving most of it for you because we talked and you know what you need to say, so God willing. I just want to ask you something.
though I remember vividly the terrible tragedy 29 years ago, as many of us do, but I didn't know personally Ari except as a little boy in 770. So everything I know about him is through his mother. And in many ways, that may reveal more than anything else. What shall I say? You know, we all are desperate to try to find answers and explanations for things that are completely unfathomable and beyond the mortal and human mind. And yet we keep trying. If you go back literally 4,000 years in history, the only answer that we've received that begins to do justice to the senselessness and loss in general, and especially of a child. Who can even imagine loss of a child? Is silence. Silence. When Aaron, the high priest, lost his children, by Yiddim Aaron, he was silent. When the 10 martyrs that we talk about on Yom Kippur, that were barbarically murdered by the Romans, and God has asked the question, is this Torah and is this its reward? People who are completely dedicated to God, to justice, to virtue, never did one wrong thing in their lives. And again, God's response is silence. God himself, he could have probably found something to say, because the truth is, as much as we think we're intelligent people and try to rationalize and try to explain things, fact is, the mind is overrated, let's be honest. It's just a computer that can process information. Yes, we have great imaginations, we've invented and innovated all kinds of technologies. But at the end of the day, the mind is just a very little small part of a big picture. And its infinite wisdom, what the Torah is telling us, is, as I think the old Belzer Rebbe said, that even if God wanted to explain to me why the Holocaust happened, I wouldn't want to hear it. I need an explanation why 1.5 million innocent children went to the gas chambers and were cremated. Explanation is going to really say, okay, now I understand, I can sleep peacefully. So it really touches upon the mysteries of life and death that we know nothing about. And therefore we ache in pain because we're trying to somewhat grasp somewhat. But it's actually the wisest and the most powerful response is when we recognize that we don't have answers, and that's not where we're going to find solace. We'll find it in the mysterious strength and resilience that emerges. Everybody knows Dvari, and we know her reaction and how she is relentless. Is that the right word? Where does that strength come from? Let's talk about that formula. So they tell the story that when the Blazhener Rebbe was in the Holocaust with some of his chassidim, his followers, his disciples, so we all know how the barbarism, the horrific torture, the inhumanity wasn't just murdering Jews, it was humiliating, it was dehumanizing in every possible way. So in this particular camp, the Nazi Yamach Shemoy commandant, everyone had their own sadism, and his sadistic idea of torturing the Jews was to play a game. And the game was that he would have the Jews line up to dig wide trenches, and then the music would begin to play, music. and probably was done around a Jewish holiday, just to really drive the point home. And whoever, any Jew that was able to jump over the trench, lived, and anyone who didn't was shot on the spot. Okay, so now the game, so-called quote-unquote game, began. And the havoc and the mayhem, nobody knew who survived, who didn't survive. Many Jews died, obviously, and some did survive. A few weeks later was the liberation of the camps. Happened to be that the Rebbe, the Blazhner Rebbe, and one of his Chassidim survived. Just one more point before the game began, the Chassid said to his Rebbe, he said, you know, what's the point of being continued to be tortured? God wants to take us. Let's just allow ourselves to be shot. We don't have to participate in this game. And the Rebbe said to him, no, as long as you have an ounce of strength, you have to keep fighting. We don't know God's plans. Anyway, as I said, the game began, the mayhem and havoc, nobody knew who what. But after a few weeks, when the camps were liberated, lo and behold, both the Rebbe and that Chassid had survived, and they met in one of the DP camps right after the war. And the Chassid said to his Rebbe, he said, you know, you're not a young man. How did you find the strength to jump over the trench? It was a very wide trench. So his Rebbe said to him, I closed my eyes and I held on to the coattails, to the kapota of my holy father and holy grandfather and holy great-grandfather. And that gave me the strength to jump. And then it was the Rebbe's turn and said, you're also not a young man. Where did you get the strength to jump? So he said, I held on to your coattails. What by Chassidim is known as being the concept of hiskashrus, which means to be bound to something that's greater than yourself. So in times when you don't have your own strength, you hold on to that strength. And in some mysterious way, it gives us the power. The midget that stands on the shoulders of giants. So anyone that knows Dvari family, the DNA, the genes, pulsate with that type of connection. It's not rational, frankly, but it's not irrational. It's super rational. I knew your father, Peretz, I knew his brothers, and we know the legendary commitment, and it's perhaps the best kept secret. It was really the essence of what kept the Jews going. Everyone wants to know, how did this small nation without an empire and without a country for so many years and without an army, without money, persecuted everywhere, a little lamb amongst 70 wolves, how did they survive? Because they had that connection to something that's greater than what is human. So when the obituaries were written in 1945 that the Jewish people wouldn't survive, and by the time 1990 would come, there would be no Jews left on earth, that was based on statistics, very simple. 1/3 of the Jewish people were decimated, 6 out of 18 million. Many of them were rabbis, scholars, leaders. Entire communities were erased from the face of this earth. The Jews, there were survivors, were orphans, widows, widowers, little children running around Europe, had nowhere to go. Nobody wanted them back. So if you're a scientist, what would you come up with? An actuary, you'd come up with that conclusion, that in America, assimilation was ravaging the Jewish people on a different end. So by the time 1990 comes, the remaining Jews will be gone, and that's it. But that didn't happen, because we were never subject, the Jewish people, to statistics and to scientific analysis, because it's not about logic. It's about things that are superhuman. And yes, the impossible is possible. And it's not a theory. You go through history, the Jewish history, and you see it. So this is what drives a woman like a mother who lost a child in such a horrific and terrible way. Hope you don't mind. That's my guess. So here we are, this tremendous paradox. We're not going to lie down and die, exactly as Dvorah just said. And yet we have to still remember terrible loss. In 1988, So Ari was then, would be 10 years old. So that year was quite a traumatic year. It was the year that the Rebbe's wife passed away, and many other events that happened then. He was 10 years old. And on that Lag BaOmer, which was a Thursday, there was what was very customary, was a parade, a Lag BaOmer parade. So the children, after marching, went to a type of park where they had rides and a carnival, whatever, barbecue. And the Rebbe determined on his way to the oil, which means the way to his father-in-law's gravesite, he asked that the car be driven down where the children were. So the Rebbe arrived in his car and was driving through the big, whatever it was called, the big field. Because the Rebbe came and was looking at all the children and waving to them from the car, so all the rides stopped right there and then. One of the rides was a Ferris wheel. And there were children on this Ferris wheel. When you stop a Ferris wheel, so yes, there are people in the lower seats, but there are also kids in the higher seats. And they got very frightened because suddenly it stops in the middle and you're hanging up there. I don't even know if they knew why. And one of the boys was Ari Halberstam. Very frightened. His friends later said he began to cry out, Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad. Then, of course, after a while, after the Rebbe moved on, the Ferris wheel continued, and that was not his time. Later, there were always those detractors that complained about things, and always had some criticism, and they challenged Chabad, Lubavitch, the Rebbe, why are you spending so much money? I think it was $70,000 on this parade. For what purpose? Could have used it for educating, for other purposes. And the Rebbe said, at least as I heard the story, and you can correct me, responded that there was a boy who he personally knew that said Shema Yisrael during that parade. And for that alone, it was worth all the money to spend on the parade for that boy to say Shema Yisrael. And who was that boy? Ari. And how did the Rebbe know him? Because the Rebbe, as Dora can tell many more stories than I know, he was in the Rebbe's home many times. He had special connection. His father, Chesed, Halberstam, was one of the people who helped the Rebbe. I'm assuming that's how the Rebbe knew the story with the Ferris wheel. Maybe not, maybe some other way. So when you hear that he was in a car, in a van, going from a hospital, for what? To go pray for the Rebbe's health in 1994 on Chav Gimel Adar. A person who was completely dedicated, as Dvorah said and some others said, to tefillin, mitzvah tefillin, on all the Rebbe's activities. And as Dvorah told me today, that literally any time it came to anything about the Rebbe, he would literally like tremble in awe. You don't usually hear that about 16-year-old boys. And right there and then, wasn't just walking down the street. Literally shluchei mitzvah. He was doing a mitzvah, not just a mitzvah. A chassid connecting to his Rebbe. And as you just said, the last words he said, that he was happy that the Rebbe came through the surgery. And if you want to add a little more to it, just in a few months later would be Gimel Tammuz, and the Rebbe's neshama would go on high. By Chassidim, they knew that by every histalkus of a Rebbe, it's unspoken, but it's a fact. 10 Chassidim, the closest Chassidim, you'd usually also go with the Rebbe within the year, before and after his passing. So I'm not going to speculate. I don't know God's ways. But you've added all together, what you have is not just a Kodesh, a sacred person, and not just a Kodesh as we call people who die a Kiddush Hashem, which means they were killed not randomly, but targeted as a Jew. And here, not just as a Jew, he was following the entourage of the Rebbe's car, and if he was able to, he probably would have attacked the Rebbe's car. He just was unable to. So instead, Ari becomes the so-called carbon. I mean, these are from the things like the Sari Aruge Malchus, the 10 martyrs I mentioned, that are not just unfathomable. It takes it to a whole other level. Every tragedy is a tragedy. But when you hear all these, you'd think a person like that would be protected. Where's God in things like this? And again, the only answer is silence. We don't have an answer for things. But silence is not a surrender. It's not acquiescing, and it's not giving up. Silence is actually the greatest declaration that my mind doesn't understand, but I will not lie down and die. And I will use the tragedy to be a catalyst for becoming far more passionate and far more committed to what Ari stood for, to what Jews stood for, what the Am Yisrael stood for from the beginning of time. Does this make sense? No, I don't think a rational, scientific mind would really make sense of this. Doesn't matter. It's like they say Nietzsche said God is dead. Then they say God said Nietzsche is dead. God has the last word. We are small little mortals who barely can figure out our lives from the few moments that we spend on this earth, relatively speaking. But we have the power to be absorbed in the infinite and the divine. And that's by saying that even if I don't understand and even if I can't accept it, and every fiber of my being is aching with pain, no, I still believe in the goodness, and I still believe in what our values are. I remember once speaking to different Holocaust survivors, Elie Wiesel, who my father knew well, and so my father, Gershon Jacobson. And after my father passed away, I continued the friendship with him. So I once asked him, and I asked others as well, in a very respectful way, I said, is it true that when the Jews marched to the gas chambers, or were marched, I should say, they sang Ani Mamin, which is a powerful song, declaration of faith. I believe, B'amunah Shlema, with complete faith, the coming of Mashiach. And even if he may tarry, delay, I still believe. So he said, well, we were in the barracks, and we were kept from a distance from these chambers. We knew what was happening, but they didn't have us right close by. They thought they can keep it like shrouded in some form of mystery. But in the barracks, all the time, every day, you had Shema Yisrael, you had Kaddish, you had this song, Ani Mamin, other songs. The Jews were constantly saying prayers, singing. So I said, with all respect, and I'm a spoiled American kid. I can't even imagine what life was like there. But doesn't it sound somewhat like a real dissonance, escapism, fantasy life? I mean, it was the darkest moment in Jewish history. The Jews had all the right to say to God and be angry at God. And instead, they're singing his praises. They were being killed simply because they were Jewish. They're singing his praises and the faith. I mean, it seems like what I'm told, they're natural emotions. And so here's the answer that I heard from many. I'll just sum it up. What the Jews were saying, people say the Jews went like lambs to the slaughter. No, not at all. What the Jews were declaring for then and forever was, you can take our bodies, but you can't take our souls. You can take our lives, but you can't take our faith. So actually, it was the greatest act of defiance by saying that you may kill us, but not our children. And if it won't be us, it will be our children. If it won't be our children, it'll be our grandchildren. But we will march to Mashiach and to the Gula. And the end of the story, we will prevail. And what happens? Now, we're talking 60, 70, 80 years later, the children and grandchildren of the Nazis, may their names be erased, Yamach Shemam, change their names and hide their identities because they don't want you to know who their ancestors are. And the Jews are marching proudly around Berlin and other cities in Germany with the tzitzis out and kippot. Go Hanukkah in Berlin and go to the Brandenburg Gate, the place where Hitler, Yamach Shemai, stood. And we have images of it with videos, pictures with hundreds of thousands of Jugendlights spewing his venom. You know what's standing right now there on Hanukkah? Exactly where he stood? A Hanukkah menorah. And to the right and left are the Christmas trees. And as the rabbi, how did he pull that off? So he said he convinced the curator that for the choreography, it would look nice to have a bright menorah right in the center and 2 pine trees on the sides. So yes, we don't forget what happened. This is not like, oh, we forget the tragedy. No, absolutely not. But what we keep remembering is that we prevail. That's our revenge. Ask every Holocaust survivor, what's your revenge? I'll open up a photo album. My children, my grandchildren, my great-grandchildren. So when I see Dvori and her passion and, I don't know, the determination, fortitude, can go on, a lot of synonyms. I'm sure they've described you in every article. The woman who doesn't take no for an answer. So yes, it may be part of her personality, but I have no doubt it's coming from all the anger and all the negative energy. What she did, whether she knows it or not, is channeled it into, look at this building. I live in Crown Heights all my life. It's the tallest building in the community, not just the tallest physically. So Ari's body was taken, but his soul lives on stronger than ever. It's not a justification. I'm not coming here to explain why, and we're not even going there. But to say that we have not built in something from it, absolutely not. This is what a Yid is. This is what a Chassid is. That despite not having answers, our response is not we're looking for answers, we're looking for strength. How do you get through it? Until the day comes when we will understand, perhaps, that mystery, that ultimate mystery. Why did it have to be in such a painful way? But never, ever think that it was in vain. That would be the worst tragedy of all. It was not in vain, because much things that come out of it, not just now, who knows the impact that it has on others. I personally know so many people, when they see this, it inspires them, because everyone has a moment or moments where they suffer terribly and they don't know where they're going to find hope and energy. I called you today to ask you about a story that I heard, and I wanted to make sure it's accurate. The same year, 1988, it was Pesach, so the Rebbe had just lost his wife, Chav Bei Shvat, 1988. 22nd of Shvat. And this would be the Rebbe, the first time that the Rebbe would be alone by Pesach Seder. So the details I share, and Dori happened with her first person, so I hope I chazer it properly. Dori tells her son Ari to, and she insisted, because he wouldn't do it on his own, have the chutzpah, to invite the Rebbe to their Seder. First night of Pesach, with the words that the Rebbe shouldn't be alone. I'm not sure how Ari mustered up the energy to do so. I guess his fear of you was stronger than his fear of the Rebbe. Lav dafka. But he did it. You'll tell me another reason. And he invited the Rebbe to the Seder. The Rebbe shouldn't be alone. So the Rebbe said, thank you. I'll tell your mother thank you. But I'm not going to be alone. I'll be with my father-in-law. or I'm never alone, something like that, right? Again, the Rebbe is saying exactly that. We're never alone. Talk about a Ferris wheel. So the oldest Ferris wheel that's still standing today is the Vienna Ferris wheel that was built in 1897. Tafresh Nun Zayin, to be exact, the year that the Rebbe Rashab established Yeshivas Temchet Mimim, which Ari was a graduate, a student of. So there's the Vienna, the famous Ferris wheel. The Rebbe Rashab, the fifth Chabad Rebbe, I believe saw it in Vienna. We definitely saw pictures of it, but he saw it. And he used it, like everything, as a lesson in life. There was a person who suffered a great loss, and he came to the Rebbe Rashab, Shalom Doiber, in Lubavitch, that period of time, around 1897, 1898. And he was complaining about his situation. And the Rebbe Rashab said to him, everything in life is a lesson. There's a new Ferris wheel. What's the lesson that we learn from it? That life is a wheel, a turning wheel. And when you're on top, you can be assured that the wheel will turn, and there'll be times that there will be setbacks and you'll go down. But when you're down below, remember the wheel continues to turn, a galgal hachezer, and that the wheel will turn up and you'll be up top again. So Ari was stuck up there like Ba'emer that year, 1988. He said a Shema Yisrael, and then the wheel turned. But the wheel continues to turn, even if we see or we don't see it at all times. That was the Rebbe Rashab's. In other words, there's a big story. Never look at life in fragments. These are all frames of a larger narrative. That was also part of our understanding. So we don't understand everything, but we know there's a bigger picture. And the bigger picture is what keeps us going, because the story's not over. And we're not alone. We have a Rebbe with us. Whether we see it or not, that's a matter of physical eyes don't see anything. What do we see? We don't see electricity. We don't see subatomic particles. We don't see love. We don't see our ideas. So what do we really see? We see nothing. We see flesh and blood. Our eyes are flesh and blood. See a very little, small little picture. We think it's everything, but it's just a tip of the iceberg. I heard from Rabbi Groner, he's a longtime secretary of the Rebbe, that in 1962, I believe, the Rebbe said to him, the beloved Rebbe of Aryeh and of all of us, that since he gets so many letters from people, the Rebbe wants to have a record of everyone who writes them. He should begin filling out index cards for every person that writes to the Rebbe with a name, phone number, address. What we call today a database or a contact list or a Salesforce or whatever you want to call it. A Rolodex. And the Rebbe said at the end of the year, I have the custom to send a Shana Teva letter to everyone who writes to me. So we'll have everyone's address and then we'll send out letters. Also, Kachava, that's what happened. Rabbi Gruner started filling out these index cards and they started accumulating. Approximately, I think after the 3 weeks before Elul, the Rebbe said to him, okay, it's time to start preparing these letters. They were form letters, but the Rebbe went through each one of them and would sign them, would edit them, would add things, customize it. And all the letters were prepared. He brought it to the Rebbe to sign and to review. One day he comes into the Rebbe's office and he sees hundreds and hundreds of letters signed. And then on the side he sees a small pile that the Rebbe himself had separated and put on the side. So the Rebbe saw that. He was wondering, what are the two piles? So the Rebbe said, Dozain di, the small pile, Bozain Sheinavek, meaning the souls that have left this world in between since he had written out these letters. Okay, so Rabbi Groner takes both piles. He was going to take the big pile and going to pack them in envelopes and mail them. And the small pile, I guess he was going to discard or whatever. So the Rebbe says, where are you taking the small pile? He says the Rebbe said that they're basically like gone. Or and the Rebbe said to him seriously, he said, with a serious face, I heard the story directly from him. When Joseph Telushkin wrote the book Rebbe, so I took him to Rebbe Groner, and that's when he told us the story. So the Rebbe said to him, very seriously, he said, "Erstens dafen ze echab mashana teva." These names, even these neshamas that are no longer on this earth, they also need a blessing for a new year, for a good year. Und zweitens, der Adress, wo zu schicken, mistama weißt du nicht, b'meil lo zei da. The address where to send them you probably don't have, because the post office doesn't deliver to Gan Eden. So leave these letters here. That's the story as I heard it straight from him. You don't hear stories like this every day. So from then on, Rabbi Groner told me that he started writing every year a blessing upon for the new year. He didn't just write for himself and his family, but also for his departed parents, because they also need a bracha for Shana Teva. What does this mean? That we're not alone. We may not know the address, but there is an address. And not only that, that address is known by someone, by the one who has to know, the Rebbe himself. So within a few months of Ari's tragic murder, the Rebbe, and of no doubt Ari is right near the Rebbe. Now I know this is not a consolation. We want him here on earth, we want the Rebbe on earth, we want all our loved ones here. But to say it means nothing is also not true. That there's no question, as the Rebbe told Rabbi Kotlarsky, Moshe's father, who lost a son, I think, who was 17 years old, in 1968, I believe it was. So the Rebbe told him on Shabbos to say L'chaim, and say, Dein Sohn sitzt jetzt und hört Chassidus von Schwer. Your son is sitting now and hearing Chassidus, or standing is hearing Chassidus from my father-in-law. So maybe there's much deeper meaning when the Rebbe told Ari that he's not alone. He was also telling him, you're not alone. He's telling you that you're not alone, Dvora, and your family, and that Ari's for sure not alone. And though we can't fully understand it, but let's be honest, what do we know about souls altogether? Goes back to the basic point that I mentioned before, that we know very little. And sometimes we're reminded in very tragic ways. And other times we take it for granted and we think we're big verstehers, we big understand things. What do we know? We know nothing. What did Hashem say? What did God say to Eov, the Job, the great sufferer? When he asked God, what is this? Why do people suffer? Why do innocent people suffer? Why do good people suffer? And why do wicked people prosper? So one of the answers Hashem gives him is, he says, were you there when I created heaven and earth? You asked me this question. What is he saying to him? You asked me why there's death. Did you ask me why there's birth? You asked me why there's suffering. Did you ask me why there's joy? You asked me why there's tragedy. But do you know why I created the world in the first place? It's hand in hand. If there would be no life, there'd be no death. But we don't really like that answer. Because when things are going well, we don't usually ask, why were we created? Why are we here? But let's be honest, if we weren't created, we wouldn't be sitting here, we wouldn't be crying, and we wouldn't be mourning, and wouldn't be grieving. So it's bound hand in hand. It was mentioned before that it was Parsha Parah when this happened. I want to conclude with this, something that left an indelible impact on me. And now I realize maybe even deeper levels based on all these different circumstances coming together. So it was Parsha Parah. The Rebbe's passing was Motzei Shabbos Parshas Korach. Sunday Parsha Chukas, which is Parsha Parah as well. Just a different time of the year. But you read the same chapter. And what is the chapter about? Death. How do you purify from death? So I will never forget this. Some of you may know that my great merit, perhaps, greatest, is that I was a chayzer and a maniach. That's the lingo used in Chabad of the Rebbe, which meant I was from the select few that remembered long hours verbatim of Rebbe's Farbrengens on Shabbos and holidays when you can't take notes and no recordings are used. And then maniach committed to paper and publishing. So I did this for over 15 years and had close access. So I remember this talk. It was Pasha Parah Tavshem Mem Ches, again 1988. That year keeps coming up. And it was the Shloshim of the Rebbetzin, Chaim Ushku, who passed away, as I mentioned, 22nd of Shvat. It was Pasha Parah that week. Pasha Kisisa, Pasha Parah, that year. And what I will never forget, because the Rebbe usually was extremely discreet, very private. He didn't wear his heart in his sleeve. But that year, everything changed. The Rebbe, in the most obvious and most blatant way, mourned for his wife. When his mother passed away in 1964, it was far more, obviously the Rebbe sat Shiva and he cried, I'm sure, but it was far more, as I said, discreet, far more private. And here, every Farbrengen, the Rebbe would say, V'achayit na'libe, the living shall take to heart. The Rebbe moved his whole operation from the 770 to his house. Wherever possible, he made sure that no one forgets and that he is grieving. And it was hard to see because the Rebbe was a Rebbe and he was a man of a king, dignity. And yet he demonstrated his vulnerability, if you can call it that. But that Shabbos Pasha Parah was a completely different level. And the Rebbe said this, listen to this story. The Rebbe brought a medrash. The medrash asks a question. Well, a medrash tells a story, I should say. Why does it say Zois chukas ha-Torah? Zois. Zois means here. This is the law of the Torah. Here's the story of the red heifer, how you purify from death. You know why? The medrash says God was showing Moshe Rabbeinu, Moses, every impurity, every toxin, every pollutant, and then saying, and here's how you purify. Tumas zov, tumas mitzera, tumas nida. Every possible way where people in some way get impure, spiritually impure. And here's how you heal. He was basically giving Moshe a recipe book, so to speak, of how you recover and how you heal from any situation. Then suddenly came tumas mes, the impurity of death. And it says, the Medrash says, Niskarkam upon shel Moshe. Moshe's face became ashen, yellow, green, pale, different ways to explain it. He began to tremble, and he said, Bameh tehei taraseh. How will they ever purify from this impurity called death? And I remember the Rebbe, like almost incredulously, asked the question, what exactly is going on here? God gave him now, showed him how everything could be purified. Why suddenly when it comes to death, Moshe says, I can't understand. How are you going to purify from this? Well, Hashem nosan, Hashem lokach. God takes, God gives. God, just as he creates death, he could also find ways to help, to heal from it. Why was Moshe disturbed? Then the Rebbe went further. He said, Moshe was chochmeh de kedusha, the ultimate wisdom. Chochmeh vatzilus. Man that God chose to speak to face and give the Torah. And Moshe learned all of Torah and all of Chassidus. And then you saw right away the Rebbe wasn't just talking about Moshe of that generation. He was talking about the Moshe in every generation. So why was Moshe bothered? He knows the neshama lives on. If anyone knows who better than Moshe. He knows that you read the Tzedek Aliyah, that every descent is in order to come to a higher ascent. He knew Mashiach is going to come, and there'll be Tchias HaMesim, and we'll all be reunited, bodies, souls within bodies. So why was he disturbed? I can't even, it's hard for me to repeat the way the Rebbe said the answer. It's published. And the Rebbe edited it. But it was more or less what the Rebbe said was that no matter how much you understand and how great your mind is, the most brilliant mind cannot soothe a broken and bleeding heart. So this wasn't an academic experience for Moshe. It wasn't, okay, we covered Zov, Mitzera, now let's get to Tumas Mes. No. It came to Misa, Moshe felt the pain, even if it's for 1 second, that a body and soul would be separated. For Moshe, this was impossible to fathom, to contain. He could not relate to it. Despite all the explanations, bottom line is, The bottom line is, how can one person deal with such a thing? And you could say Moshe was looking at not just death in his time, but all the deaths that would happen, and all the tragic deaths in every form. And that's why the only way God could respond was take him and say, here, this is the mystery of the red heifer. You may not understand it, but I'm giving you now the way to heal from it. And it was very clear that the Rebbe was also speaking about himself. And I never heard the Rebbe speak in that fashion. So personally, I'm basically saying, I'm not looking for answers. There are things that will not have an answer. The pain will be there. Because even for 1 second, the body and soul are separate. Even if a second later, there's tchis amesim, it's still, that second is already too much. And that gives us strength. Actually gives us strength because we realize that our minds don't have to answer everything. But there is an address. And there's somewhere someone knows the mysteries of it all and knows that the neshama of Ari is where God wants it to be right now. We don't explain and understand why. We'd rather him be right here with us. But remember, neshama sees us even though we don't see the soul. That's a given. But the pain is we can't see it. You can't embrace your child, and you can't embrace and physically connect. But spiritually is the only solution. So here we are, 29 years later. And I feel somewhat like family with you, especially the last months we've been talking a bit, right? As you probably know, Dvari knows how to communicate in her own way. And you can't take no for an answer, etc., etc. I say that as a compliment. But here we are 29 years later. I don't know if the tragedy is any way less. I don't think so for you, for sure not. But at the end of the day, as great as the tragedy is, what you build from it is even stronger. And that's our response. And you have responded valiantly and courageously with tremendous sacrifice. As you said, I'm sure it's much easier for you to just curl yourself up in bed under a blanket and not have events like this. And in general, all the activism and everything you've done. But I don't even know if you have free will. I guess the hecht in you and the hiskashrus and the mesiras nefesh of your parents and grandparents just will not let you rest, will not let you just lie down. And yes, you're doing the greatest honor that a mother can do to a child. I would rather we wouldn't have heard your name and we wouldn't know there would be a museum. Let's be honest. Much better to have a mother and her child and other children all healthy without all. But after the fact, the Kiddush Hashem, you've taken a Kaddish and turned it into a global Kiddush Hashem, which is no question already has repercussions and will have continued repercussions for generations to come. And by then we are promised that Mashiach will come, Ani Mamin, and that we will prevail and be reunited, the loved ones. Remember, the wheel continues to turn. And there is an address, and the right person knows where the address is, even if you and I don't know exactly where it is. So Hashem should bless you and your dear family with his strength. I'm not going to say with the answers, with his strength to be able to continue to forge ahead and demonstrate that no matter how dark it may be, the light that you bring to this world is stronger. And in a way, we even say it with chutzpah to God, that even when you allow darkness to enter, we are not going to accept that lying down. We'll bring even more light. We'll become more committed to goodness and to kedusha and holiness. And in the most beautiful way, you have honored your son, not just with this event, but everything you do. So may you continue to have the strength. And in the Mitzvah Hashem, very quickly, even before Pesach, we should be reunited with Ari, with the Rebbe, all the Chassidim, all the men and women that gave their lives for Yiddishkeit and died because of being Jewish. and in general, all our loved ones. And then, Eid Hashem Ken after be, in some strange way, we'll be able to recognize the narrative, how it all led to something far greater than we can ever imagine. Thank you for the honor to share a few words. And I don't know if anything can do justice, but we salute you.
Yasher Koyach. A lot to think about. I do want to call up Richie Taylor, representing the New York Police Department, because he has a lot to say. He's soon to be Chief of Community Affairs. He wears a yarmulke proudly, and he makes a Kiddush Hashem every minute of every single day. And we are partners in a lot of the work that we do. And I think because of everything that is going on around us, I think it's important that you probably want to hear from him tonight, because he could also tell us what and how the NYPD is looking out in times that we're living in right now. So Richie, without no further ado, please come up.
Thank you, Commissioner Halberstam. It's deeply meaningful for me here. Usually I can get to a podium and just speak, but when it's personal to me, personal to my family, personal to my friends, personal to the uniform that I'm wearing here tonight, it's a whole different story, it's a whole different ballgame. Devora, just a household, just like we know there are individuals out there that just have one name and we don't need a last name. Devora is the same thing. Devora is Devora. We all know how powerful that name is. We all know what that means, how she fights for us, how she lives and breathes for each and every person in this room, in this community, in this city, in the state, in the country, in the world. So, Commissioner Devora Halberstam, on behalf of the entire NYPD, we are always with you. We will go to all lengths of the earth for you, because you give every ounce of your being for others, truly day in and day out. Speaking of, on behalf of the NYPD, from our great Police Commissioner Keishan Sewell, who's been in this museum already, to the First Deputy Police Commissioner, also been in this museum already, to the Chief of Department, Jeffrey Madry, highest ranking uniform member of the NYPD, who's been in this building already many, many times. It's their home. And they say that. And they mean it, and it's exactly how they feel because of your warmth, of your welcoming. My wife, Mary, here with us tonight. She's been in this museum with my kids, with my children. It's hard to show them what it means to build a museum in honor of Ari, whose name is proudly right on this building that stands for everything that you've heard tonight from so many of the distinguished speakers here. As the mayor says, you've turned pain into purpose. As the mayor says, you've turned darkness into light. As we just saw in the video, it's about bringing light into the world. And I know the mayor says it all the time, that if anybody could have just shut down, if anybody could have made every excuse that we'd understand and just stayed at home. Would have been Devora, but it was the opposite. Devora has done more for the communities of New York City than if you consider almost anybody else when she had everything against her, every challenge against her. As we heard tonight, from the moment of the terrorist attack on the Brooklyn Bridge, the speaking about road rage and things like that, how Devora fought for true classification from the FBI. While she was suffering. It's hard enough to fight for truth and justice when you're not suffering. Any attorney will tell you that if they were ever subject of litigation, they would hire their own attorney, because when you're in the box, you can't see the box, and when you're in the fight, you can't see the fight. Devora was in it, and she still fought and accomplished. Not from the outside, but from the inside. From the days of the trial to the day where she took the oath of office as an honorary police commissioner in the police commissioner's office at police headquarters, when she raised her right hand, and I was fortunate to witness that, when Devora raised her right hand and took an oath of office to serve the people of New York. There are truly no words to describe being in that room with the police commissioner, with the police chiefs, and with Devora. Just as a matter of fact, I know it was mentioned, Joel Eisdorfer is here, the senior advisor to the mayor. When Joel put together a screening regards to the Holocaust on International Holocaust Remembrance Day at police headquarters just a few weeks ago, the film was called Devora's Hope. It's about a story of struggling and surviving the Holocaust. And it's a Devora from a different family, but the mayor who was there, and Devora was sitting in the front row, the mayor still got up on that stage and said that the film is called Devora's Hope, and I'm looking right at Devora Halberstam. When I think about hope, when I think about perseverance, just powerful. Me personally, I'm a police officer for almost 18 years, and I remember, as if it was yesterday, my own orientation being assigned to Brooklyn South as a rookie police officer. When I say rookie police officer, I mean one day out of the police academy, sitting with about 250, 300 of my fellow graduates from the police academy, was sitting at Fort Hamilton Army Base in Brooklyn, just at the foot of the Verrazano Bridge. And Devora Halberstam, up on that stage, speaking about what it means to be a cop, what it means to be a public servant, what it means to give, and training cops at every orientation for many years before my own, till just a few weeks ago, when I was a captain in Manhattan South. Devora came to the orientation for our new police officers who were assigned to Manhattan South. And Manhattan South is the borough where Ari was on the FDR Drive, first going northbound to the hospital to escort the Rebbe for the surgery, and then going southbound back on the FDR Drive, and telling the same police officers who are assigned to that same borough just how important it is to keep your eyes, your ears open, because as Devora says, when Rashid Baz, we should never say his name, when he went into that chop shop by Sunset Park and said, "Fix my brakes, I'll save," the other word, a person in that chop shop saw what was going on and took a handful of shell casings from the Glock firearm, from the Uzi gun, and wanted to do the right thing. And that person today is in the Federal Witness Protection Program under the United States Marshals. That person took a fist of shell casings, called the FBI, and said he has information regards to the murder on the Brooklyn Bridge. And the FBI, from what I've learned from the Vara, whether they didn't feel that this person was credible, they didn't understand him, whatever it was, the FBI blew it off and practically hung up the phone. They did hang up the phone. This person then walked into the 62nd precinct in Bensonhurst, again, with the shell casings, and whether it was animated, whether it's a language barrier, but came to police officers there and said he has information. And for whatever happened there, the police officers didn't feel he was credible. They didn't feel that he had real information. They practically told him to leave the precinct until a lieutenant got wind of what was going on, caught up to this person, and said, explain to me what's happening here? What did you see? What do you know? And this person who I mentioned is, again, in the United States Marshal Service Witness Protection Program. Showed the lieutenant the shell casings. The lieutenant brought him back in, which started the investigation, which, thank God, led to the arrest. Devora teaches those police officers, tomorrow, you may be the cop that a person walks up to with information of a crime. Tomorrow, you may be the cop to help facilitate investigation of a murder, of a terrorist attack. Take it serious. Take it serious. And that resonates. I know it resonated to me for the past 18 years where you said it. And I know it resonates with every police officer. Devora has trained, clearly has trained well over 50% of the New York City Police Department, hands down. Probably more like 60%, if not 70% at this point, maybe more. Talking about from the very top to the rookie cops of the street. That's how Ari lives on. Every roll call that you do, every training session that you do, whether it's the orientations I mentioned, whether it's before Yontiv, like I know you'll be going to the precincts before Pesach now. I know Pesach, Purim, especially now, Pesach is probably the hardest Yontiv. I know you've said it before, the hardest Yontiv that you have, because at that Seder table is an empty seat. Let's all just consider for a moment our own tables in our house where we have a Seder, or we go away. That empty seat that Devora has and will always have at her Seder table for the rest of her life. She'll always have an empty seat there. But Devora, we're all here for you in any way that we can. And considering that, yes, like Rabbi Jacobson said so eloquently, we don't understand the way God runs the world. We don't understand really much about the world. We don't understand where the solar system ends. We know that it keeps expanding and expanding, but the brightest, most intelligent scientists in NASA have no clue where the universe ends, how it expands, where it expands to. That's just the limitations that we have. I'm going to tell everyone a secret about Devora. Devora asks for a lot. She calls a lot, not just me, but whether it's the mayor's office, whether it's other police officials. Devora calls us a lot, and she asks for a lot. But the secret is, it's never for herself. It's always for others. That's also how Ari lives on. Just a few months ago, there was a person in the hospital. Devora called me at about 11 o'clock, maybe midnight, and she said that there's a person in the hospital. And it's not really the lane of a New York City police officer, if you will, but Devora said, make that phone call. If there's a way to do it, to help, then help. If there's a way to extend your arm, just like we know with Paro's daughter. We all know that Moshe Rabbeinu was in the basket in the middle of the water, and Paro's daughter put her hand out, and a nace happened where her hand extended. Devora teaches the same thing. Try. You know what's right, do it. Put your hand out. And Hashem will bring that hand where it's supposed to be, but take the initiation. Like Kriyas Yamsuf, we know we had to jump in first. Dvorah says, jump in. Do it. Hashem will be behind you. Hashem will make it happen, but be the shliach. Powerful, powerful. The gatherings in your home, how you invite everyone from the governor to the mayor to every elected official, really, for the Jewish community, to every police official. Yeah, I'll tell everyone another secret here. I know Rabbi Jacobson also mentioned about the story with Ari going to the Rebbe. Devorah's own home, her own sukkah, is the Rebbe's sukkah. And when she brings in, like just the mayor, I know Joel, Fred, I know we were just with Devorah's house a lot. Sometimes it feels like we're there more than our own homes. But when the mayor was sitting in your sukkah, Devorah, and you said it's the Rebbe's sukkah, it was so powerful because the mayor has been at the Ohel. The mayor's been at Hari countless times, over and over and over again. This mayor, Mayor Eric Adams, again, powerful. The way you bring people together, just at my table here, I see Serge. I know Serge, tremendous supporter, tremendous friend. You always mentioned Shia was 4 years old. All your kids, and it's very, very hard, but you have a leadership role that you have taken to heights unimaginable many, many, many years ago. Who would ever have thought that you could build this museum? Just like the world, we see that the world's created. And some people may say, okay, the world was created. But we all know what went into, we all think we know what went into creating the universe. How much went into building this museum? How much still goes into building this museum? We saw a beautiful presentation of an interactive film, but imagine Kavachome, how much more so in person. The Chancellor of Education. I was just at City Hall when Joel and Fred, the mayor, we had a roundtable with the Jewish community. I was sitting next to the Chancellor of Education, David Banks, a gentleman. We were just talking about current events, what's going on, and of course, Devorah's name came up, of course. And without missing a beat, the New York City Education Chancellor says, yes, actually, I just spoke to Devorah. My goal is to have every single New York City public school student go through her museum and see what it is about fighting anti-Semitism, awareness in the Jewish community. There's no greater calling in the world than public service. But you do it on steroids. Public service is 90% less of what you're doing. You're doing something so advanced. To think about just that concept, how one day any person that went to the New York City public school system was going to remember that they came through the doors of the Jewish Children's Museum, of Ari Halberstam's museum in Crown Heights. Every single person. Not an easy feat. No one else I know that could do it other than Devorah. Nobody else. You keep us focused. You keep us focused as a police department. You keep us focused as a public service agency about the victim, about what it means to provide support at someone's most dire time. You keep us focused on what it means to go the extra mile. You keep us focused on why we became police officers. On making ourselves proud to have the positions that we do and to utilize them to the best of our God-given ability. To conclude, also Devorah may not really want this out, but I'm going to say it. Not only is Devorah the founder of this museum, and not only is she honorary commissioner of the NYPD, but she also currently serves in a very active role as the chairperson of the NYPD Civilian Hate Crime Review Panel. What that means, every hate crime that occurs in New York City is investigated by the Detective Bureau's Hate Crime Task Force. A determination is made as to the motivation of the perpetrator to that crime. If the motivation of the perpetrator was motivated either fully or in part by a person's, say, because there's many classes, but say a person's religion, that would be charged as a hate crime, which means that the district attorney would prosecute it with a greater level of punishment. So if it's, say, a class A misdemeanor, it may become an E felony. It's one level up because of the motivation. Devorah's critical position as the chairperson of the Civilian Hate Crime Review Panel, they look at the classification reports made and determined by the Hate Crime Task Force, and they have the authority, if they disagree with our determination, when I say our, with the police department's determination, they have a process that is used and has been used to overturn our determination and to be now investigated as a hate crime. And just a couple of scenarios, not just against the Jewish community, but also against the Asian community. There have been complaint reports for criminal activity taken by us where it was not classified as a hate crime. And Devorah, with her board that she chose, every person on her board, which represents the vast majority of New York City, they determined that we got it wrong as a police department. They determined that we missed something, and it was a hate crime. And they've had that classification redone because we can't police New York City alone as a police department. We don't know it all. We need the public's help. And Devorah, your service on that critical review panel has proven so instrumental for the victims of those crimes and for New York City in general as a whole, because we need the trust of the people in New York City. And the fact that we have you and your board on a panel to oversee what we do, you're the perfect person at the right time, in the right position, and thank you for that. So with that, thank you, Devorah, for what you've given to me personally, to my family, for the community, for my friends. We'll be forever grateful. Just coming here tonight, I was with Joel in the car, with Joel Eisdorf, again, the senior advisor to Mayor Eric Adams, and we went over the Brooklyn Bridge from City Hall to here. And I know as Fred mentioned it, Commissioner Kreis mentioned it, we saw the signs. The Ari Halberstam Memorial Ramp. I know you've been in my car many times when we came across that sign going over the Brooklyn Bridge. And I've even tried to stop, and I know you've said to Hillam at those signs on the ramp of the Brooklyn Bridge. It's powerful. It never diminishes. And with that, I know on behalf of everyone here, everyone that knows you, we love you. We appreciate you. We're so lucky. We're so lucky that the mayor said that you've turned that tremendous pain into tremendous purpose for us, because we get so much, we've got so much, and we know we'll get so much more. And anything that we can do to help be there for you always will always be our honor and our pleasure. And our, of course, his Hashem should have an aliyah to the highest level. And thank you, Devorah, for everything that you do.
Thank you, everybody. I think slowly we're losing people, hey? That was amazing, Richie. I'm a little embarrassed by it. You told them all the secrets that you're not supposed to tell. Not all. I agree, but too many. Anyway, I want to thank everybody for coming tonight. For Ari's neshama, the most important thing is that he has an aliyah. I pray that he's here with us tonight. I think he's here with us tonight. And I always say he lives on in this museum. This is his second home. And I really believe when I walk through these walls, it's the truth, I don't just say it lightly. I really have that sense of peace that he's actually here. I actually feel that. So I want to thank you all again for taking the time out, because I know everybody has their own schedules, and I don't want to keep you any longer than, the only thing everybody missed was, and you don't want to do it, but there are a few men left here, and the women can't sing. I really, really, Shalom Ber, want you to sing Ani Ma'amin. And nobody wants to do it, come on. Because one thing you know, everybody knows the last thing to go when a person dies is the hearing. And when Ari was shot in his head and he was dying for 5 days, he laid on life support. I remember when the doctors, and you know, with all due respect, we have a doctor in the room. My husband, where is he? But the one thing they told us, the neurologist, was, we really don't know anything. We don't know what goes on in the brain. But one thing they said, keep singing to him, because the hearing goes last. And Ari loved, and in those days we don't have all the singers we have today, but really, he loved Avram Fried, and he loved Ani Ma'amin. Who would believe that he'd need to be singing that song? Because I'm sure that's the song that took him to heaven, and he wore the earphones that we used to keep on his ears while he lay there and playing the music constantly, all the Nagunim and all the songs that he used to love and listen to in his own room in the house. Anyway, having said that, Shalom Ber, he's looking at me. Don't look at me like that. That's right, thank you. Remember that.